lo and behold, revenue tanked in this country, just like it is now. It's absolutely tanking. We're getting to the point where our country is near bankrupt. We can't fund anything in this country anymore.
There's probably a sweet spot. There is a point where
there is a point.
There's a point where taxes are too high. There's a point where taxes are too low. The idea that we can go totally in one direction or totally in the other direction and reach some sort of infinite utopia based on your own idea of which one is the best state.
No, there is such thing as too much. But right now we're at a point where our infrastructure, if we have people that come from, let's say we have people that come from Hong Kong or people that come from Tokyo or other parts of China, they look at our infrastructure and it's rated second world. It's rated second world infrastructure. We're talking about stuff that hasn't been rebuilt in 50 or 60 years.
If you've driven over any of these scary bridges, Yeah,
we have what used to be
see-through bridges.
Yeah, exactly.
We have what used to be top of the line research industries in this country all leave because the funding isn't here anymore.
Right.
We have an education system that's absolutely tanking. We have schools in Chicago and Philadelphia that are closing down because we can't fund our education system anymore. And it's part of the reason why our higher education costs so much money now. All this funding since the 80s, proportion by proportion, was taken out of our education funding, and as a result, these public schools aren't running for a profit. If they need that money to run, they used to get that money from the state, and then whatever they needed to make up their bottom line was put onto tuition. And it's still the same way today, but they get so little now that they have to skyrocket these rates on our public schooling.
They're also, though, not so much the public schools, but the colleges and universities. I just read an article about this today. They're paying some of their middle and upper middle management much higher salaries than they used to. They're paying their athletic department much more than they used to. And a lot of these schools are places that their football team hasn't won a game in
wait a minute.
years.
You or I, I think Notre Dame, I think Michigan, Ohio State, and URI. Come on. Where's your hometown pride?
Well, I don't have a lot of hometown pride when it comes to the football team.
But this was another thing, actually, I talked to people about in terms of decreasing the costs that we have to pay for that come out of the pockets of students or the pockets of parents. I'm normally not a huge thing about privatizing everything, but that's actually one thing I think we should privatize is school sports. Don't drive up the cost of your students where they just get their education, or the parents are just trying to send their school because you want to have a 150,000 person football stadium costing $500 million to build.
I agree with you. I remain completely unconvinced, with the conventional wisdom, is that somehow people are willing to go to a state university or go to a private college because of the strength of its football team. But
if it has a cool radio station on
that's different.
I always loved my college radio station. I always did.
But dialing it back for a second, I'm going to agree and disagree with you at the same time. I'm a firm believer in targeted tax credits because targeted tax credits, when they have to deal with hard commodity, hard investments, like the investment tax credit that was so successful in the 80s, because it forced businesses to, in order to achieve the tax credit, actually spend money on either infrastructure, facilities, equipment, things that generated wealth, and to me, it was it was a huge success on multiple levels. One of the reasons why we have the cable TV business today, and a lot of the cable infrastructure that we have, is because of the ability to have tax credits that were ultimately fungible and resellable. So, I think you're absolutely on target with trying to redirect, if you will, corporate profits towards and that will be more economically efficient. On the other hand, I will always make, even in this room right now where I'm surrounded, I will always make the token objection that America is based on capitalism, and capitalism's success is ultimately related to the personal wealth / karma / sense of achievement that people draw from successful investments. Risk capital, as a result, is necessary for successful investments, and unless people on a personal level can realize some of that success, risk capital will seek to exist, and that's ultimately what's tied into, I think, the failure of socialism and communism. So I'll agree to disagree. I'll always I understand the analysis of trickle-down economics. That's why I believe that tax credits and things like that can ultimately be much more profound in impacting business investment. On the other hand, in an international world, we've opened Pandora's box. High tax rates on a personal level will drive, a la England, on a local level, New Jersey, which had the millionaire's tax. People who have high incomes have flexibility and have the ability to make choices and leave. And that's what we've seen with all this bottled up money over in Europe because of our arcane confiscatory foreign tax structure.
And that's a big part of the low skill labor issue is that, the quote unquote brain drain of Rhode Island, or the rental car syndrome. Kids get their degree here, they make a little bit of money, and as soon as they can get out of the state, they bail. That's what happened to all my friends that aren't losers. They left.
Part of that's that we don't have a very broad range of diverse jobs either. If there are certain industries where if you want to be in the industry, you have to move to New York or Boston, or
they're living here and driving up to Boston every day.
Right. We are nothing other than a low rent, kind of cool place with cheap bars and cheap restaurants and cool beaches, alternative to living in Boston.
And Allen's Ave.
Yes, the Pink Palace. May it stand forever.
Well, to your point, though, I think there is, again, a sweet spot in what we should do about capitalism here. We don't have a mass exodus of millionaires leaving this country, partly because people like being here, and partly because at this point we're not talking about raising the top marginal tax rate to what it was during Eisenhower's years.
No, that was around 92%.
Yeah, right. We're talking about raising it to what it was during the Clinton years, which was not abusive in any way. Yet the amount of screaming you hear about it is as if we were talking about raising it back to 92%.
Well, at my tax rate, for example, if you were making $600,000 a year and living pretty comfortably, your effective tax rate would be about 30%.
Yeah,
that's what it would be.
Which is not abusive.
And a lot of people today don't realize this, that if you do up the math in terms of what you're paying for taxes today, and you're only making like say $50,000 a year, your effective tax rate is about 26%, as opposed to the wealthier who tax rate is 12%.
Yeah,
does that make sense? No. That makes no sense.
It's upsetting to the wealthy or the highly compensated, if you prefer that term rather than wealthy, because the amount of money.
How about the appropriately rewarded?
I'd say the inappropriately rewarded.
They worked hard. No, I wasn't going to say that. I was going to make a joke.
They worked hard for their money.
They work hard sitting at their desk.
The Waltons worked hard to inherit that money.
They certainly had to kiss their dad's ass for a really long time, which was very difficult because they really didn't want to do it. They really didn't want to do it, but.
Well, I'm going to bring up a subject sort of out of left field, and I think it kind of encompasses all of these issues.
I love left field.
All right? Dial it back to 2008, 2007.
Came there.
How would you have handled General Motors' potential failure? With all the issues, whether it be the retirees. I mean, I know it's a complicated question, but fortunately, in this format of show, where it's a long-form discussion format, you have time to tackle it. What are your feelings about that?
About the about our auto industry at that point?
Yeah, the General Motors quote unquote bailout.
When I get, I would have had a better answer for you about the bank bailout, which should never have happened. But in terms of the auto industry bailout, to be honest, they were on the brink of failing for a long time. Mm-hmm. If you looked at their numbers before then, they were tanking. For a lot of years, they were tanking. And it goes, again, simply straight back with what's been happening to people in the country here, is that, people are getting less and less money than they used to have for a long time. And they were simply being outcompeted by countries that could manufacture their vehicles for a lot cheaper than what General Motors was manufacturing. If they didn't get a bailout, they would have failed. They would have been bought by foreign company, for example. They would have failed. There's no question about it. They would have.
Well, ultimately, and full disclosure, I work in the automobile industry. Ultimately, Dodge was bought out. Anytime I see anyone driving a Dodge pickup as a truck guy, I look at them lovingly, stroke my hand on their truck and say, hey, great Fiat. But, as a sitting member of Congress, how would you have voted? Things like TARP. Let's focus on auto because it encompasses worker issues and encompasses retiree rights, tax policy.
Now about GM, let's remember that GM actually tried to buy back the government stock because they're tired of the joke of government motors.
Right.
But the government said we haven't made enough money off your stock yet. We're not going to let you buy it back. We're keeping it. So it's not like they haven't recovered to the point that they could pay back the government for what they did. Mm-hmm. But the government wants to make their end too.
Well, I'm kind of relieved that the government isn't just saying okay and taking a loss.
So it's not like they haven't recovered from that. But
would you have supported the bailout in the manner in which it ultimately evolved?
What, in terms of buying the GM stock?
Well, yeah, in terms of Well, I mean, for example, the semi-structured bankruptcy of GM, the primacy of the unions, and how, in a sense, they were elevated above stockholders and bondholders in the food chain, which, it may strike a. It's interesting about that situation because, it was feel good from the Democrat standpoint because they were saving the workers, yet at the same time they screwed royally the retirees who used to be the workers. So, I mean, in unfair question because it's so complicated, but
it is complicated because depending on different paths you go, someone's getting screwed. Someone is getting screwed, depending on the path you go. Whether you screw over your workers or your retirees or your investors, someone is going to take a hit. Mm-hmm. So it's a matter of who do you think is going to take the hit. I mean, when you talk about investors, they're taking a risk. When you invest in anything, you're taking a risk. Mm-hmm. So if anyone should have taken the loss, it should have been investors.
Even though the investors, to a degree that was unusual, even amongst American businesses, were in a sense retirees. So again,
right. You mean because they were getting it as part of their pension?
Stock? Well, I mean, retirees of General Motors for an entire generation had been arm twisted into buying General Motors bonds.
Right. It's like how they do it at my company. So it's in terms of you don't have to buy company stock, but they really try to.
Yeah,
really want you to.
It's kind of like the United Way of retirement plans.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, you could either look at that benignly as we want you to have a stake in this company so that you care whether we do well or not, or you can look at it not so benignly as. Right. Prop our shares up, and the degree of arm twisting probably makes a difference there.
Yeah, GM was really a complicated situation. It was lose if you do this, lose if you do that. Mm-hmm. If you have a different thought about it, I'd like to hear your opinion.
Well, to me, what was offensive about it was that. We've got a long-standing structure in American industry, and there's a food chain, if you will, in the event of bankruptcy. So, again, it doesn't initially sound like a populist issue, but it was. The bankruptcy essentially flipped investors' rights on its ears in favor of a politically palatable union situation. Now, I happen to be in favor of private unions. Very much so. I come from a union family, and I believe I believe trade unionism is just another example of capitalism. It's employees getting together and organizing for their economic benefit, just like raw materials, just like the financial sector. No difference in my mind. Public unions are another issue. But that being said, here you had a direct government intervention, a tossing the bankruptcy process on its ears, loaning all sorts of money to a company that actually, if you look past the hype, isn't very successsuccessful.
No, they're not doing particularly well right now. But no one in the auto industry is doing particularly well right now.
Ford.
I mean, in general, you can point the housing market the same thing. You can point straight out our over $1 trillion student loan debt. The estimate was the auto industry loses approximately $200 million a year on new auto sales because of student loan debt. Everyone is having a tough time with it.
We don't have time today to get into a discussion of what's
we could go on all night about stuff. I'm sure we could.
Yeah.
No, and that's what I enjoy about this format. Right. Is the fact that we're talking issues, not and again, that's our mantra here. We want to actually develop issues to whatever level possible.
Yeah. The reason why I never said at the time the same thing on my right up here in terms of what happened with the GM and the auto industry in terms of what I would have done differently was. Because it would have been a hard choice in terms of what do you do differently. We're at a time where working people in the United States were already getting slammed every direction, especially coming at the same time now as the financial crisis and people losing their homes. Mm-hmm. You have to do something for people.
Final quick question, sort of a yes or no. If elected, would you term limit yourself?
Would I do what to myself?
Term limit.
Term limit.
Term limit. Okay.
Although you may be terminal after.
I was like, would I terminate myself?
It's like rural juror.
Well, it
depends how many suppers you have to go to.
No, to be honest, it depends on how many initiatives I can get through. If like my list of initiatives I have on there, getting initiatives, making Congress work, jobs, making sure we get everything back on track. If all those initiatives are met, I would gladly retire into the sunset. I have no interest in making a career out of politics.
So we can assume you'll be there for 20 years. If that's your list of issues.
On that note, we do have to get out of here. Our guest has been John Maciel. Check him out online, Maciel for Congress, spelled M-A-C How the hell do you spell it?
Maciel.
ForCongress.com.
And
John,
you can,
thank you. I just
come to our Facebook page because we'll post that.
I'm
so
really
that
glad that you guys could carry the show today. 'Cause I just drank a ton of alcohol yesterday.
No, it was fun. If you guys want me to come by again sometime, let me know.
As we get closer.
Right.